Today I have a very special guest, my friend Elizabeth or Betty Van Liere.
The doctor asked me one time why I was so healthy, and I said, I guess God's got something for me to do yet, and maybe this is what it is.
Welcome to Heritage of Truth. Today I have a very special guest, my friend Elizabeth or Betty Van Liere. Welcome, Betty. She's coming to us all the way from Colorado. So, hi.
Hi, Jeannie. It's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. Now, Betty and I originally met several years back at writers' conferences, and it's just so nice to see that you're still writing at almost 90 years old. I'm so proud of you. I hope when I'm close to your age, if I make it that long, that I'll be writing still too.
I'm sure you will.
You have a book called Dare to Live, Devotions for Those Over the Hill, Not Under It. Here's the book. And it is just a really fun book. Now, you got this published at what age?
88.
88 years old. And it's a really nice book because, for one thing, it really covers so many of the things that as you get older you start to deal with. But it's also got large print. Look at that. So even if you have trouble reading because your eyesight's starting to go, you'll be able to read this book more easily. So was that your idea, Betty?
I'm not sure, but I'll take credit.
Okay. Well, I laughed through this book. I almost cried, especially with that last story. Oh my goodness. There's just so many touching stories in here. And you have so many wonderful insights that I found very, very helpful.
I think that last story is my favorite because it just lived in my heart so many years.
Yes.
And I tried to get it published separately, and I thought in this devotion, well, I can do it this time, so right. I did.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that story?
Okay. My husband and I took a group of teenagers to this lake, and we left with their counselors were with them, and we left to go rock hunting. We came back the next day, and there were no kids, no tents, nobody there. My husband stopped at the ranger office and learned that there had been a drowning right after we left. At that time, there were no cell phones. They couldn't get a hold of us. So they had to contact the people back in Albuquerque and come and get the kids. So we drove home in a different state than we went. And when we passed the sand dunes where we had let the kids off for a picnic before we got to the lake, the kids had been writing their names in the sand, and the one boy had printed his name in big letters, Aaron. And his name was still there. He was the one that drowned. And I wanted to emphasize that some way, somehow, we want to leave behind. I was here.
Yes. Yeah, that was a wonderful story. And you talk about different things that we have to deal with our kids, with our grandchildren, and you have a lot of really good advice and insights. And one of the things I wanted to mention too is in each devotion, you've got the scripture verse, then a story that relates, and then a prayer, and then you have a step further that gives us other scriptures to read and study, and then you have building blocks of faith, like where there's God's will, there's a way out. And then you have questions for us to ponder afterwards. And I just really have enjoyed reading this. And I've laughed out loud, and And I love it when a book makes me laugh out loud.
Good, thank you.
So, how long have you been writing?
I must have started when I was very young, maybe 8, 9 years old. I read a story about a little slave girl in Africa. Somehow, slavery must have touched my heart. And the story of this little girl, I marked her travels out on a map in the back of my dictionary and wrote a story to go with it. So that was the first time I tried writing, I think.
Wow. And when were you first published?
1962, I had a story in Child Life about a rooster who was waking people up too early and earlier and earlier because he thought he was so great. Then the king heard about it and called all the birds in and said they wouldn't be singing anymore. They would have a different voice. But he told Rooster that he would still be able to wake the people up, but he would not be singing. So the next morning, Rooster thought, well, I can still be great. And he lifted his voice and started to crow. And from then on, it's been his cock-a-doodle-doo that wakes the people up.
That's cute.
That time, I did everything wrong. A single space, I left no margins, but they accepted the story anyway, so.
Mm-hmm. Well, I really applaud you for persevering and writing even as close as you are to 90 years old. So few people at 90 are doing much of anything. A lot of times because they can't. But I mean, look at you, almost 90 years old, and you have a second book coming out, don't you?
Yes, I do. It's called Laugh, I Dare You. It's not a joke book. It's just to help us laugh no matter what goes wrong in our lives or what is good in our lives, because we have this hope of Jesus.
That's right. Well, I like the way that throughout your book you are honoring God with everything that you're writing about, and I know you, and I know that that's your goal in your writing is to help people and to honor the Lord, and I really respect you for that. You know that Fanny Crosby has always been one of my heroines, because she was still writing, I believe, when she was about 80 years old, and you're doing it even past that. So I'm really proud of you.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. The doctor asked me one time why I was so healthy, and I said, I guess God's got something for me to do yet, and maybe this is what it is.
That's right. Well, one of the other things that you mentioned in your devotional is how people, no matter what situation we're in, we can be praying for others. You can pray from a sick bed, and you know, my dad has Alzheimer's, and you know, there are times even when he's encouraging, even though he's not quite all there. So no matter where we are, God can use us, can't he?
Yeah, that's so true. And the prayer, I belong to a prayer chain at our church, and it's full of mostly people needing help, and then there are thankful prayers as well. So it's great.
That's good. Well, how do you think the devotions in Dare to Live can help people who are worried or discouraged or sad or hurting?
I think mainly it's to help other people feel they're not alone. You can feel very lonely at times when you go through rough things, but if you can find somebody that's even worse, in the same boat or even worse than you are, it gives you a lift because, and the thing is, a lot of times the people that are really, really down and sick, when you visit them, you go away blessed because they're usually very cheerful, very happy.
Yeah. Well, they're usually really glad to have visitors too. I know that. Well, one of the things I liked in your book, they always say that And the most important, well, one of the most important lines is your first line of your first chapter. And other than the scripture verse, which is everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind from Ecclesiastes 2:11b, you said, my husband retired, then he died. I thought that was a great beginning line because right away it shows hope and then devastation. And then you tell us how you dealt with that, how the Lord helped you through that. And there's so many stories in here like that. There's hopeful ones, there's funny ones. So is there any advice you would like to give to young writers?
Don't quit. God is always full of surprises. You don't know what's around the next corner. So if you feel that you are a writer and you've studied and you've learned the craft and you are close to God especially, He's going to lead you where He wants you to go. Because like you asked me about, did I ever want to write a book? Mm-hmm. But still, that was in God's plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you didn't really want to write it, but He had that plan for you. Cool. A lot of times that happens.
Yeah. I never expected to write a book.
Wow. Okay, well, I really, really appreciate you coming to us all the way from Colorado. Is it a nice day there?
It's hot as usual. It's been very hot this summer.
Okay, well, I hope you can stay cool. And I thank you so much for being our guest on Heritage of Truth, Betty Van Liere, and her book, Dare to Live, Devotions for Those Over the Hill and Not Under It. Thank you, Betty.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Jeannie.